So welcome everyone. For the ones that I actually had the opportunity to welcome on the entry, welcome again. For the others that I didn't, welcome everyone. I feel so grateful to be here with you after years of here. The lady over there, that's a very tough one, told me that if I leave that stage, I need to put my mask, so I don't intend to do during this session. It's going to be an hour of where we're going to go over the full stack observability in your application-first hybrid work. My name is Carlos. I'm the chief architect and a Cisco fellow inside the company, and I'm working on everything that relates to emerging technology applications and the corporate strategy. So the idea for us is to go through that agenda. What do we mean by app first in the hybrid world? And then after we go past the initial marketing slides, because they need to feed their children as well, then we go straight to what full stack observability is, why we need it, and actually how it works and how we can help. So there are some embedded demos. The material is going to be shared with you, obviously, and this session is being recorded for the ones that cannot attend in person here. So without further ado, so what we heard on the last 1 year and 9 months, if you will, is since the pandemic starts, a lot of new digital services were created. Talk with the IDC folks, they said that there are at least 30% more digital apps out there, and by 2022 or 2023, if I remember correctly, there's going to be 500 million new apps out there. 500 million with a B. It's a lot of applications out there and a lot of digital services, and AWS is obviously one of the big providers for that. But let's try to get an example on how one of those might actually look like. So let's pretend that you are a bank. You are a financial services institution. It applies to any business out there, but let's pretend that you need to actually build a new functionality within your application. And that's pretty much to create a contactless cash withdrawal on an ATM, and then your boss asks you to develop this in 2 weeks. So you have an app running, a lot of people already has it, you are creating a new functionality there, and the customer journey is pretty much, you have the app in your phone, you can leverage location services, it's telling you where the closest ATM is, you want to get there, the app should identify yourself, find out if you have money or not available on your checking account, and be able to drive to this ATM, identify yourself, handshaking over there, and get the money out of it. The experience is supposed to be seamless, straight line, so it's meant to be not only seamless, but also simple, and it's outcome focused. You want to have the money, that's it. You want to get the money and get out of there as fast as possible. However, from a developer standpoint, that journey is not as straight line. Why? Because as you're developing a hybrid application, as I mentioned before, you might find yourself on situations where you need to actually consume services that are accessible from a cloud API. There might be SaaS services that you need to use for your app to run. So let's say if it's running on iOS, you may use Face ID, then you may use to Apple credentials and some of the APIs to make sure that your single sign-on aligns with the ones that is on iOS. You may need to have something that uses the credentials of that particular user on an on-premises environment because you might be in a country that you have regulations that force you to do so. Going forward, as you look at this, the developer journey is naturally hybrid. Hybrid doesn't mean necessarily one location in another location. There is a sense of hybrid being I'm an AWS and I'm an on-premises, and that makes hybrid. Well, I would say that's the easier to fix or easier to deal with. The harder is when you have hybrid code. In fact, I was on a financial services customer once, and I asked the gentleman over there, the head of development, where is the code? Does anybody has a documentation of that code? And the gentleman told me, yes, that code was built for someone that is already dead. So the person was deceased. I'm not joking. So I look at the gentleman and said, okay, I don't do resurrections. What am I supposed to do? So when you deal with this nature of traditional applications and code that are traditionally called monolith, but still run the business, and new cloud native ones, and they need to talk, we have a hybrid location. You have a hybrid code, and you have hybrid consumption models. SaaS consumption is totally different than on-premises, with obviously different than AWS. And within AWS, you even have different consumption models if you're dealing with serverless or some other regular EC2 instance. Having said that, this is all fun, but the problems start to become more interesting when you talk about the operations teams. And I put teams in the plural. Why? Because the journey between the time that the customer get their phone and open up to the point that the customer is happy or not, happy most likely with the money on his pocket or trying to figure out why he doesn't have the money, there is a bumpy road usually. And usually happens when the bump brings an interrogation mark. There is something wrong on that particular journey. Either it's too slow, or the money didn't come out, or the location services didn't map the proper ATM. Whatever this application meant to be, if there is an issue, the operations requirement is fix the user experience and fix it now. Do you agree with me? Because the human nature, patience, and experience is expected to be real time. If you don't have this coming to you real time, at the best you complain with your spouse, or your kids, or your grandma, or she complains with you, depends. At the worst case, you may tweet and try to use tweet as reversing the arm of a particular company to fix your app. Poor guy on the other side of the tweet line don't even know what's going on eventually. So when this happens, usually you have the situation of multiple teams on the operations capacity that needs to work together. I just had 4, which is the typically one that are involved on this kind of situation. And when this happens, there is a typically point-fingering situation when it's not my problem, it's your problem. It's not the network, it's the compute, it's not the compute, it's the application, it's not the application, it's the security. And by the time you keep point-fingering, you get to a situation where the experience of the customer is even worse. So there is a need to break down those silos by actually cutting down the mean time to innocence and just telling and trying to figure out what is actually needed in order to provide the best experience. It's easy for you to understand that if you think a different way. Go 2 years ago, a lot of customers have their digital journey plans, either because they were implementing or because their bosses have on some plan or PowerPoint somewhere. Well, here comes the pandemic. In a month, everybody recognized that whatever they had a 3-year plan to start the digital journey, whatever that is now need to happen in 2 months. So people get in panicky mode, and they move stuff around. Either they enable VDI to have some of the applications to be shown on the screen, or they just jump on cloud services to try to build stuff from scratch. Almost 2 years down the road, we now have a lot of those applications running digital, a lot of DevOps, a lot of CI/CD pipelines implemented. A lot of people know how to fix from the code bases when my situation before happens. But the operations side didn't follow the same speed, didn't follow the same procedures. You have on that situation of a code broken on an application, some issues, you have an ability to fix the code almost immediately if there is an identification what the issue is through a CI/CD pipeline or through a cloud services. Not necessarily that identification is 100% available today. So there is a need for observability as it goes across the multiple domains, across the multiple teams, and more than anything, all along the whole journey that comes from the developer and the end user experience. And that's what we're going to talk about here. So full stack observability, what it is. We at Cisco did a research, actually a survey on over 30,000 customers worldwide last year. We surveyed executives, the CXO lens, but also the people that has their hands dirty, the people that actually operate the environment, regardless of their bosses. And we talked with them and asked one question, in addition to the other ones, but one key question was, if hybrid and multi-app is your business reality, how do you enable it? And then as we start to get to the answers and start to talk with the people, we recognize that there's 6 teams within the majority of the companies that are responsible to make sure that the business inside those corporations actually run. There are the 6 teams that are typically related to success of any business. And as we start to talk with them, it was easy and interesting to identify some commonalities as we start to talk amongst themselves. So between the applications and the DevOps teams, the most important criteria for them for success is visibility. They want to know what's going on and have insights at the real time what's happening. However, if you talk about the DevOps and the cloud architects, they want to have business continuity. So the visibility is implied to some of them, but they not necessarily care about the business impact and some of those visibility because it's beyond their reach and beyond their scope of charter and actually even capability to have the implementation as part of the business in the companies. So as you look at this, This is an interesting mapping of the 5 top priorities that we heard from all those customers. But also, we asked them for the details on that particular insights matter and what else we hearing from customers. We heard from them that 75% of them wrestle with the overwhelming data noise. What does that mean? It's not only there is a lot of data coming at them. Well, that's kind of stating the obvious. It's also the point that the skill set of different teams prevent them to understand and more than anything correlate different types of data. The security people receives a lot of data that they understand because it's security kind of framing for the security people, but the application people may not. And the opposite is also true. The same with networking infrastructure. So there is an overwhelming data noise, but more than anything, in addition to the people, there is a process struggle that has to do with the struggle of bringing this together, that high volume of data, in order to bring root cause analysis when the issue happens. And almost 100%, a staggering 96% of them anticipate some sort of negative consequence to their business. So the conclusion that all those customers came to us were pretty much simple. I have one shot to deliver. My end user, my customer, even on business-to-business customers, there is less tolerance and requirements of more actions. And the consequence may be switch to a competitor, abandon or delete an app if your business is driven by an application, let's say, tell other people that I had a negative experience, which implies my branding. So all of that implies a real-time response, not only from the code, but mainly for operations. That implies an evolution from regular monitoring, which we call silo or domain-based monitoring, to full-stack observability. This is not Cisco saying. Obviously, I'm from Cisco, I'm telling you here now. But this is an industry evolution. So I've been working with Gartner that has documents on this. We co-author a paper with IDC that is talking about the same phenomena, which is pretty much the evolution of silo monitoring, domain observability on specific areas of expertise. When you have teams for compute, network, storage, cloud, security, applications, and so on and so forth. And not necessarily they have the cross-domain correlation and the ability to bring this all together. So you do have the capability to provide baselines, receive a lot of alerts, even provide root cause analysis within that domain. Cisco is very well known for root cause analysis and a lot of tools for networking observability. There are other vendors that do this specifically on other areas. But how you bring the cross-domain correlation and dependencies, which is what full-stack observability is bringing to the table. Cisco went one step further, and you add the business context to which I will explain later here. But this is pretty much a picture on what you can see from the evolution of the industry. There are other sections on the event on AWS and others out there that's going to talk about the same topic. And this is one of the key pillars of the partnership between Cisco and Amazon Web Services. So with that said, let's go on how it works. So how it's meant to work. From Cisco, we bring the full stack observability solution in the market today with what we call business context. It's predicated on that framework, which is very high level, and I'm going to go in details as I speak and move the slides. So it's predicated on a visibility, insight, and actions framework. What is that meant to be? Visibility is the ability to ingest data, and the ability to ingest data at a real time when available. There are some situations when real time is not possible. For instance, some services on AWS don't present their information on CloudWatch in real time. Some others do. But you can have visibility for other matters, like on-prem services, some other information that may be using for mobile devices. You grab all this information for the business context and the user experience, and by the time you ingest that, you have the capability to contextualize this, and by creating this common context, you bring the dependencies together, and you're being able to correlate, drive insights, and those insights will prioritize what type of actions you need to do. And those actions are usually around remediation or optimization. I will explain later, but let me explain before I go there what we mean by business context. This is a typical question that people ask me. Typically, when you talk about business context, the first thing that comes to mind to people is money. So let's say I have an application. The application is generating $1 million a day for me. If I have this application failing for an hour, so I may have an impact of $50,000 or $100,000. There's usually a monetary association with business context, which is acceptable, fair, and typically the case. So we do have solutions in the market today that do map the business context from a money perspective with, let's say, the infrastructure. Typical scenario, you have 2 instances, 2 virtual machines if you're running on premises or a hybrid environment. One is responsible for running a $1 million application, another one running a $10,000 application. The infrastructure guy doesn't know which one to kill if he needs to kill one, because he doesn't have the business context. He's going to look, or he or she, by the way, he's going to look on those 2. This one I'm going to kill. So you have 50% chance to the $1 million or $10,000. What we do, we correlate today and say, hey, dude, that one is 10K, that one 1 million. If you want to kill, you better touch that one. Your boss is going to be less mad with you if you don't mess around with the $1 million one. However, there is another aspect of business context. So let me give you another example. We are working with some gaming companies, and I don't know if there is someone on gaming here. If you go to a gaming, and a lot of the cloud gaming or even mobile gaming even further, the most important business context to them is churn. It's not money. Why? Because the gaming, in particular distributed gaming that the teenagers play all the time, it's free. So you need to get into the game up to a point where you start to pay add-ons and they start to make money. So if the experience is too bad, so they never get to that point, it's not about the money. It's about the experience to avoid churn. And sometimes it's over 50% of churn. I was talking 2 weeks ago with a healthcare provider when the most important business context from them to us when we are implementing their solutions of full stack observability is, I want to know how many ICU beds I have available, how many doctors I have on a determined shift, and how many specializations are available in that hospital at a given time. Because when someone comes with an emergency, I need to know how to react. The money for them is not that important because it comes from insurance at some point in time. So you see, so the context of business contextualization that we bring in that solution is important and not necessarily will translate on dollar amount or any kind of monetary value only. So with that said, if you go back to the context that I was saying, the framework for the Cisco solution is bringing the business context by ingesting visibility from those 6 sources, the application performance with all the services that goes with this, the network and the internet. The network and the internet, the reason I put them separate is because when you talk about the network, it's something that we may own. You go in AWS and you have your own VPC, or you buy your own switches and your own routers. But what about the internet? Your employees are working from home. You are working from home. I'm working from home. The only connectivity that I have from home is the cable modem or the DSL, is the plain internet. So if I want to have the experience measure on how that application is running at my home, I need to monitor the internet as well, because it's part of the end-to-end experience. The same applies to the infrastructure where it runs, like if it runs on infrastructure on your own data center, on an edge or colo device on AWS region, but also the security levels and so on and so forth. As I mentioned before, we ingest all this data. We ingest this data based on the MELT stack. MELT stands for metrics, events, logs, and traces, as I'm going to share on the upcoming slide, and also the investment on OpenTelemetry. We embrace OpenTelemetry as core part of our full stack observability project and the solutions that goes there. As you might be aware, AWS has also supported OpenTelemetry on the new instance since September 23rd, one day after OpenTelemetry for traces became mainstream and open source. And how we have this all brought together, it ingests a common place for us to create that dependencies, contextualize this, create this common context, and provide all the recommendations either for business transactions or security incidents or all other types of KPIs like SLOs in order to provide actions. For recommendations for up to infrastructure, let's say cost and workload optimizations are typically ones that we see from the customers, and application security and detection. Let's say you have a piece of code that's running, there is a vulnerability that was found. How can we avoid that to spread around? So let's go for an example that is more realistic. Remember that application that I mentioned before on the bank that we built? Let's switch and have one that's a little funnier. Let's add a pizza app. I believe everybody relates to eating pizza, in particular as you're stuck at home for almost 2 years. So I don't recall how many times I ordered pizza at home, and I have a bunch of those on my phone. And this situation happened to me more than once. Like the mobile application started to behave weird. It was taking very long to get to the checkout screen, and by the time it get there, the payment was timing out, it was not going through, and it was kind of awful, so I gave up. But I was still hungry, so half an hour later, I go there and try to order the pizza again, and everything works fine. Anybody relates to it? Have you seen something similar? It doesn't need to be a pizza. It can be something else. So this is the end user perspective. I am frustrated. On this example, I'm not only frustrated, but I'm damn hungry as well. So it's even worse. So now let's take a look on the behind the scenes to the business operations guys. So while I'm hungry as an end user, my experience is a little bit frustrating, as I mentioned in the previous slide. The people behind the scenes are having something like this. We were hit by a malware, but we were able to detect and contain it soon enough, so avoiding the remote code execution attempt to succeed while putting, in effect, servers and instances in quarantine for patching. If you read that statement, it's pretty much associated to a malware that got to that particular instance they were running. This is a hybrid application, so it could be on an instance on AWS, could be on a data center that's running part of the code on premises. Either or, you have a malware that hit that environment. The security team were smart enough and fast enough to avoid spreading of this, but at the same time, they actually not only did that, but they put already some of those servers for quarantine. So you agree that a big chunk of this involved the security operations team. However, by the time they put the servers in quarantine, let's pretend that there were 100 instances before. If they put 50 instances on a quarantine, let's imagine if I have 1,000 customers coming for 100 instances, now I have 50 instances only. So I have twice as many customers per instance. So there is an imbalance of supply-demand, if you think about that. So as I mentioned, however, it put the extra load on the remaining infrastructure, and customers start to abandon the app. Why they abandon the app? Because the experience was very bad. This, combined with associated revenue impact, automatically triggered a right-sizing act, which was to increase the app front end across multiple AWS regions, watching a potential cost spike. So here's what's happening here. I have a malware that hit on the beginning. It actually implies the security operations team. It has a collateral effect with the infrastructure guys because they need to do a right sizing. But what we provide is the ability to correlate this with the business app. Because now the application teams, which are the ones that are running the pizza thing, they know that people are abandoning the app. The guy that manages AWS cloud infrastructure, EC2, have no clue how many people are abandoning the app. Do you agree with me? But now what we did, we correlate that there are some people that abandon the app. So we need to right size. When? Well, we define a threshold to say if more than X% abandon the app, you right size right away. Don't need to wait to authorization on your services now and all the cost analysis. Just do that, because the amount of money that we're losing might be much more than the amount of money that we save by having 2 days of approval on a workflow approval that happens on the company. Anyone have seen this? It doesn't happen to anybody here. It just happens for people outside of this room. So when you do that, you are actually now bringing 3 teams together. You have the security in the beginning, you have the infrastructure team and the application team. However, by the time that you actually instantiated new instances across multiple regions on the front end, what happens is there is a new distributed landscape, and the application topology now increase the end-to-end latency for you to reach the backend service. So I'm paying you the credit cards, so I might need to reach American Express, Visa, MasterCard, whatever I choose, Apple Pay, whatever I choose to pay on that app, is now needing to be accessed by multiple distributed regions while it was concentrated before. So now I'm dealing with a networking team, and that SaaS service that needs to be reached now needs to be accessible through the best internet paths along the way. In addition to all of that, I now need to be able to not only guarantee the access to the new places, but also guarantee the end-to-end latency for the experience on the end user. So I had 3 teams before, the security, the application, the infrastructure. Now I brought the network team. How do you correlate this in real time? Typically, we don't. That's what we are providing. That's what we have available today. And you're not only able to provide this on a per teams basis, but usually the managers want to see them all together. So we bring that as a single dashboard all together, in addition to each of the tools that people may be using on their own domains of expertise. So let me dig a little bit deeper on how this is possible. As I mentioned before, we are dealing with the MELT stack here. MELT stands for Metrics, Events, Logs, and Traces. I'm not going to read all those slides. It's just an example for you to have as a reference when you don't have anything better on the Saturday night to deal with. You go back to that session and enjoy. Here's the bald guy from Cisco. Let me read his slides. 2 things I want to bring to attention here. If you look at logs, logs are predictable time frame kind of information that are discrete. You can have a log coming from CloudWatch, you can have a log coming from Firewall, you can have a log coming from a networking device. There's still log from a format perspective. They have 3 different contexts. It can be a cloud architecture, it can be a security thing, it can be a communication thing. The reason why we deal with MELT is because it's data-driven. It removes the context and the bias from the teams, because by the time you're dealing with the data, you can correlate based on the information from the data. Obviously, if you're dealing with the MELT stack, not only logs, but also events are time-based and discrete, while MELTs are aggregate, and traces are not dependent on timing. It depends on the interaction of every customer as it goes through the application. So data cardinality is an interesting factor that we deal with here. And if you look on my previous stacks, I just color code just for impactor's sake. MELT is all over the place here. This is the same text that I had before. So I'm dealing, instead of dealing with 4 different teams, as I mentioned before, which I'll need to put them in a room, 2 pizzas, and the one that survives best is the one that wins, with typically the operation behavior in some of the companies today. Now over Zoom, WebEx, Microsoft Teams, or whatever video that we implement, we are dealing with the data and actually trying to correlate them and bring the context on a database. And by doing that, we can actually have, let's say, application as the center of the rationale, because that's what's closer to the business. You build a dependency mapping on the application, and you contextualize bidirectionally correlating with the network, including the whole internet. The whole connectivity matters. It can be something that you control from an office when you have multiple branches, or it can be the regular internet, or a mobile using 5G or an LTE. Is still an application there. Or you can correlate to the infrastructure when you have the supply chain, the dependency mapping from the application all the way to the infrastructure, regardless of where it's running, and be able to bring it all together. And that information, that recommendation, what one needs to do. So if I go back to my example, the same sentence that I had there, all those verbs in yellow that actually has the security team be able to detect a runtime issue and be able to avoid remote code execution, combine and map the revenue impact and associate to what needs to be triggering on the infrastructure right sizing on that particular example. The analysis of optimizing the routing through the whole internet from anybody that's consuming your services, in addition to your application consuming third-party SaaS services, or my example, a payment one, and also the consolidated view. All of that is what Cisco has available today, shipping as full stack observability solution. We have customers implementing this in production, running in production, and that's pretty much what we have today. In partnership with AWS, if you happen to run your workloads on AWS, or if you run it hybrid, let's say part of this running on your own data centers on premises, we can actually deliver the same one. So with that said, how can Cisco help? Let me go a little bit more specific on what we have on our solutions today, which delivers what I just mentioned before. So we have pretty much 3 big assets from Cisco that we leverage together. They, by themselves, are valuable, used, and capable for each of the domains of expertise that they are meant to. So AppDynamics is a very well-known application performance management tool that does all the capabilities for end user journey mapping and dynamic end user discovery mapping. All these capabilities that AppDynamics brings to the table today. ThousandEyes brings end-to-end visibility from the network and internet, plus SaaS applications. And Intersight is multi-cloud management orchestration. That's all good. That's great. You can love it, tweet about this, buy, use. We'll be happy. You're going to go to heaven after you die. Everything is going to be great. My whole point here is not about those three. My whole point here is how we get them together. Because at the end of the day, they represent multiple teams. And the skill sets and the tool sets they tend to use. So what I'm going to explore are those use cases that we have shipping and the top 7 that customers use today on their own implementations. So we classify them on 3 categories: performance optimization and security. Typically, the customers gravitate around performance, as you can see by the amount of use cases that we tend to have people going after. So they tend to look about performance more than anything. Then they look at after optimization, usually in two kind of lens: the cost optimization, how can I optimize my costs without neglecting security and in not going under the performance that is acceptable for the end user experience, and also the application resource management, the right sizing capabilities as if needed be, and the application security. Today, we have implementations on application security as it relates to runtime. Watch our space, and if you go to our Cisco booth that we have on the expo areas, you're going to see what we're announcing on the API security as well, regardless of infrastructure that exists, which is another area that we see a lot of correlation needed. All of those 7 tends to encompass those same 4 teams that I was talking before. So in a nutshell, I'm going to show you some screenshots on how this is coming together, because we only have the AWS machine, so it's hard to run a real live demo here. So we have them running on the booth if you want to go. But pretty much the same scenarios that we had on these use cases are represented when we bring the application teams together with the infrastructure and communication teams by correlating the information on real time between AppDynamics with security applications and ThousandEyes. This allows hybrid application monitoring and the end-to-end customer digital experience. What I mean by end-to-end, it means if the application is running on your phone when you are at home, connected just on LTE from your phone, and that application is running on a region in AWS and consuming a SaaS service for God knows where, we can map the end-to-end view of this, and that's what I'm going to show you soon. The same applies on my example before. The contextualization from the business application, how much that application actually brings to the business in context of US dollars, let's say, versus where it runs. Does it run on Lambdas? Does it run on EC2? Does it run on virtual machines on-premise? Any combinations or all of them combined? How we can bring this visibility together and the full supply chain independence of one another. And last but not least, same thing as you have the business application and what is actually the assessment on vulnerabilities or any other sort of runtime security issues that may happen while this application is actually running. So those are the typical combinations that we see on our customers. And let me go back to my pizza thing. By the way, every time that I present this and I put this picture, I get myself hungry. It's a yummy picture. I need to give to the marketing people. I know I'm wasting time here, but the marketing people deserve the credit. It's a really good picture. Anyway, and I'm missing presenting in person for a long time. I used to be more agitated than that. So anyway, here's the pizza app. Hopefully there is some pizza here on the week in Vegas that we can go for that. This is my fake pizza application. The same one I mentioned before. On the left-hand side, you have the dependency mapping of that hybrid application. That application actually runs on Kubernetes. It's hybrid from a location environment in the sense that it uses some of the workloads on premises and some on AWS, and it consumes third-party SaaS services like the credit cards for payments, the MasterCards and the Visas of the world. we can have this real-time visibility. You can see that I have some greens and some yellows and some reds there. But one of the things that we can deliver as part of our full stack observability solution is what your bosses and the boss of your bosses care about, which is this. How much money is on the card, how much revenue I'm making, and how much revenue I have at risk, and I have a green, a yellow, or a red. They usually don't understand the green, yellow, and the red, let's be honest. They actually, no, between us only, they don't. They care about those numbers. And between you and me, almost $8 million of pizza is a heck of a lot of pizzas. Okay? So this is what we have there. Business is running good. So we go one step further, and we start to bring the correlation that I mentioned together in a single dashboard. So that dashboard has the view for the bosses on the top left. But at the same time, I can go over the application and have the mapping on the end user journey. So that application has 4 screens. You log in, you select after you log in what your toppings, you order, it puts on the card and you check out, and hopefully it's coming your way for you, kill your hunger. This is the typical view of the application. If you see on that dashboard, I'm already doing a real-time correlation between what's the application end user journey as all the steps and the infrastructure where it's running. It's already on the right-hand side. There is a direct correlation between one another. You can see that. So on a single screen, I'm already bringing the pool of 2 domains of expertise, and not only gets the greens and the yellows and the reds on the single kind of frame, but also bringing the information correlated. So the user journey maps is okay, as so is the infrastructure. Well, as it usually happens, things go wrong, and when they go wrong, you may end up in a situation like this. If you end up in a situation like this, the first thing that happens is the top left. Your boss sees red. He doesn't understand the numbers. He sees red, so he's starting yelling on the food chain. You are lower on the food chain, which means there is amplification of the food chain. So it gets to you. It comes to what the heck is going on, being very nice on my English here. Pretty much, you look at this, and there is a business at risk. Pretty much a lot of pizzas are not being delivered for a good reason, and that reason is there seems to be an error on the card to the checkout. Why? Well, I used to have a very high conversions rate, almost north of 70%, or who else goes on the application and ends up ordering a pizza, which is my normal business rate, and I'm now at 5%. So obviously something is wrong. If you think in silo-based monitoring, you're going to see there is something wrong with that application. The code might not be working, something like that, because it's obvious. But if you see the correlation, the infrastructure is still green. So if you just stop for a second, you can look at, okay, if there is something wrong on that code, and I'm hitting there all the time, up to a point that I get from 70% to 5% conversion rate, why is the infrastructure not even blinking? Do you agree with me? So let's start going. So the people start to dig on the code, so you go after the end-user journey map capabilities that exist within AppDynamics, and you map all the screens and how many people are there, and identify that, let's say for iOS, people coming from iPhones, or you can have that journey. And sure enough, if I zoom in, the vast majority of them are being dropped on the checkout. There is obviously something wrong on the checkout part of that application. So the people can't check out, which is not good, because I don't make money and they don't kill their hungriness. It's kind of not a good state to be. So what we did is, okay, if the infrastructure is not blinking, so let me try to correlate what the end user experience is. And the end user experience is the application running on their iOS mobile device, which is on the top on that journey, and this is the client side of it, and the server side of it is running on a data center and on AWS. In between those two, there is something that's called the internet. It's kind of a big space. So let's kind of map one another. So what we did, we actually look at this and map and correlate what is the payments income in US dollars versus what is the transport from the client and user over the internet. Interesting enough, the payments were having X amount of value, and at some point in time, it just dropped sharp, which happens to be exactly the same time that you have a bump on the latency on accessing those third-party services. Well, you start to wonder, well, it might not be a code issue. It might be a reachability issue. It may be a 404, someone actually changed a password, I cannot get access to this particular code there, or maybe something wrong on just access. So by doing that correlation, we bring this together, and contextualization means we get all the information from the infrastructure, all the information from the application, and you bring together on ThousandEyes, and you do an analysis for that particular user or batch of users running on iOS on that particular given time, what happens in the internet. So if I zoom in, sure enough, there is a high latency, which was over 400 milliseconds, which makes it very hard from an experience standpoint, sometimes even timeout as depending on how you code it. And if you look back on the top, if you look at the top right, you see that I was on a low kind of latency response time, and as a sudden, there is a bump that came up to 400 and something. So if I go back for a second, you can see, well, that was not the case. The whole internet latency and response time was pretty stable. Something happened, and then it bumped all the way up, and that seems to be what is generating the issue between that application and the destination that needs to consume those services. But it actually not relates to the user. This is the payment services. So what's going on is the communication between the application that happens to be running on the previous slide on a data center on premises in San Francisco, something that the pizza company owns, the path to the service is actually going over the internet, and the payment services that's being provided by MasterCard or Visa or Amex, I don't know who, is actually running on AWS region in East Coast of the United States. So you have a data center where the pizza app is running on the West Coast, and the services that it's consuming, it's a SaaS services running on the East Coast. And I'm mapping the internet in between them in real time. And if I look at it, back in the day, it used to be 60 give and take milliseconds. It's pretty okay. But now, if I fast forward to the issue of today when I had that bump, you can see that the path is a little bit weird. I moved from 9 hops to over 20 hops. Why? Because that same service is now being provided for AWS region in Singapore. Yeah, the gentleman was perfect. He did, wow. Actually, this crap happens. Believe me, we see this all the time. Why does that happen? I don't have the answer. Do I know that it happens? Yes. Can I show and respond in real time and tell to the code person, hey, it's not you. Actually, there's something wrong. We just need to reroute this and point this to the right place. One thing that I learned dealing with these operation situations multiple times, when you consume a SaaS services, they usually don't inform you when they make changes. Usually it doesn't happen. They make a change, and you just be good with it. And you find the crap, and then after that, you find the change. So we are proactively monitoring this and being informing to you that it might be a DNS resolution issue, might be an upgrade that they made, might be a change on an API, might be a lot of things. But to the gentleman, scientific conclusion, wow. And it's impacting on me. So I need to know what's going on, and I have the ability to actually share this, be able to fix that, and actually return back on my own recovery applications. So the application people know that it's not a code issue. There was something as easy as accessing an external SaaS and being able to inform where it needs to be rerouted back, and now I'm back on game. We did this real time. Imagine trying to do this on multiple teams on different places and putting on a room that's now virtual. It's very hard. So you have this real-time correlation. But now another interesting thing is happening, as you see on the screen. I'm recovered, the code was not the issue this time. The application people got saved. But now what's starting to happen is that the infrastructures start to have different colors. So I see a lot of a spike in the memory going on here. Why? Because now I had a lot of people that was trying to order pizza. They could not access. Now I opened the floodgates. I just rerouted back to where it should be. So everybody that was trying to order now needs to boom, 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 get everything in the same place. So no wonder why the infrastructure is spiking up. So that's where the correlation with Intersight, which is a tool at Cisco that has multiple capabilities that brings AWS operations, allows us to use Intersight Workload Optimizer, which brings that mapping of the supply chain dependencies on all the components that are part of this full application stack. And by doing so, it makes an analysis in real time. What's the recommendation? The recommendation, in this case, is right size for a given time until you get back on track. And in order to automate that, we have an embedded service with HashiCorp Terraform, so you can have inference code as part of this. If you use CloudFormation, it's okay as well. But since there is a hybrid environment, you might well have a recommendation that can be right sizing on AWS regions, or actually vMotion something on your data center if you happen to have one. So those are valid. And if as this application is running in Kubernetes, as I mentioned before, we do have a mapping on the Services Mesh Manager. If you're running Services Mesh on this application and using Istio, let's say, to actually map all the services, we can manage it to actually allow you to do canary simulations and see how much that is going to impact you, not only at the infrastructure, but actually the Kubernetes level as well. So in a nutshell, this is a screenshot on how the Intersight Workload Optimizer is. What you see on the left-hand side is a supply chain tree that goes from the application all the way to the components of the infrastructure, the network, the compute, and the storage. And on the right-hand side, you have the major components here, front-end, the back-end, and in this case, the DNS, all the Kubernetes services. And on the middle, you have the recommendations. So if I go and click the ones that are showing me there are some trouble, it's going to show up to me the recommendation. On this case, I have enough red room on my data center to just vMotion or move from one particular server that is completely overloaded on capacity and actually rebalance this by getting from the memory environment that was 83% to 68%, by just moving workload to another one that was from 56 to 71%. So even with the balancing from the supply demand, memory was my issue. I had the memory available. I just didn't know what it was, and I didn't have enough context to know that I need to move just for rebalancing, because I have a struggle on response times. So with that said, this is something we have available and also shipping today. And what is being optimized? What is being optimized is the application from the lens of the business context. On this case of this pizza application, the business context is money, is revenue. If it would be another type of application in business, might not be the case. On this case, I have all the 4 screens of the application running. There is a mobile app, and it's running on a hybrid environment on premises on AWS regions, and it's written on Kubernetes. So you have the infrastructure operations being optimized with the context of the application, and the application being informed on the context of the infrastructure as it relates to the end user experience. This is available in shipping today. And at the end of the day, what you want is to get back to a situation like this. It's not necessarily the same as before, because the application is dynamic. So you have more or less users, and that's the daily of the applications and operations. But we did help, and we have this available today, that helps those 4 teams to get together and be able to provide this response time that is closer to the business requirements time. One last observation that I want to make. What I showed you is a single dashboard. There is a lot of people and customers that want to have that single dashboard so we see everything in a single place. That's the dreams of the managers and the dreams of many teams. There are some teams that just want to have contextualization on their own tools. So let's say if they use AppDynamics, they want to have the network information and the infrastructure information so they can have enrichment of their application tools. And the same for the network and the same for the infrastructure. We provide both. You may want to just enrich the experience for each of those teams, which is basically empowering their monitoring even further. As we see more and more business becoming digital, more and more applications become cloud native, more and more of those services being built on top of DevOps, we believe that more and more of this operations experience that tends to be siloed is going to become full stack observability. For one single reason, the response time is going to be demanded at the same speed that the application is being built on DevOps. It's just expected. It's a matter of having technology like this that empowers this today. So with that said, this is my last slide. I believe I have one more just on the link of the demo. We have the visibility as the initial part of the framework. We have the choice of bringing this and correlate them together. We are building towards the ability for people to concentrate the store of this on a single place on such a way that you have a unified data place when you can have a single platform when all this data could be ingested and brought together. We also have today available the integrations in between the pieces as people evolve their traditional applications more towards cloud native and digital. And the insights that we bring together today is more about optimization, performance, and security, with or without a single business observability dashboard. If you love the pizza, or if you're hungry a little further, by the way, I didn't have lunch today, so I am indeed hungry, and it's on the record. So there is a full demo that shows that scenario, and it goes in details on all the 7 use cases that I mentioned before, with all the screens and all the implications and how this all works together. Spend the time that you want. They're not long videos, and you have the QR code to go there. Beyond this, if you want to really go deeper, we have a lab that has those 3 in that same application running, plus a T-Chart application that's one that's open source, plus we have a financial services one, plus a healthcare one. So if you want to actually try your own business and bring this together, we can do it to you and show what the art of the possible could be. With that said, I believe I still have 7 minutes before they gave me the boot, because he was kind enough to say, you have 60 minutes. If you go us over, I'll show you the exit pass. You see, he's even saying it like that. I love you, but if there is any questions, I would love to take anyone. I don't know if there is a microphone or something, otherwise I will repeat the question. Yes, Mr. Wall.
Do you have any options with the timeline views that include CI/CD or deployments that occurred during those times, so you can see relative to deployments?
So the question was, do we have timelines that shows the CI/CDs and deployments that happens during that particular analysis? The answer is yes. Depends on what type you want to do. So let's say if you have a CI/CD that implemented multiple codes on the last 2 days, we can see that from the code implementation time. As I mentioned to you, we are coming more with the API in order to actually map this from the API usage as well. It's not still today. We are bringing this so you can have a CI/CD to consume, let's say, rogue APIs or even APIs that are zombie APIs these days. But we do have the ability to map this to CI/CD so you can correlate this with how many times you have a push, let's say. Yes? Yes, sir.
I think the whole thing around analyzing the business context is great. I work in a company that it's not immediate like a checkout. It's more like they work with the customers to get a result over time. And then it's only when that result over time is achieved that then they make actual revenue. So I'm curious how, when you don't have that immediate feedback and immediate revenue generation, how do you then apply that business context?
So the question, if I want to summarize, by the way, if anyone wants to leave, don't feel obligated to stay. I want to thank you very much for the people that stayed, that survived my accent and was patient enough to stay with the mask here. Thank you very much. The question of the gentleman was pretty much, let me try to paraphrase and you correct if I'm wrong. The business context is great, and it allows you or allows us to actually get the impromptu response of what's happening at a given time. My need is to have something across a given time so I can accumulate that business context and be able to provide this as a trending or something like that. So today we have capabilities of trending, as you say, to accumulate the business and get where you're going. What I'm particularly working as part of the incubation team is getting towards predictive. We don't have predictive yet from that sense of business context because business context is unique in the industry. We are the only ones that have it. So you have this on the training aspect to do what you're going. What we are thinking is how we can do this on predictive, which is more based on the behavior and on the trends, what do you expect to be there? Not only an algorithmic training. We can do the algorithmic training today, not the predictive yet. Yes, sir?
So I'm more on the business side of things, but I apologize if this is not a terribly astute question.
There is no stupid question, my friend.
But using your pizza analogy, and you went from 73, 74% checkout down to 2%, and you said 30 minutes later you came in. Did everything we saw today happen in that 30-minute time frame?
Yeah. So the question is, from the initial screen up to the last screen, what's the time frame of that happening? It was around 30 minutes, give and take. It was pretty much, you got something on the payments completely broken, so nobody could actually check out credit cards and anything, so it accumulated everything. By the time we find out there was not a code issue, and reroute this and right-size it so we unlock the supply by providing more demand, then the business flow came in.
And from your perspective, is that 30 minutes fast or slow? If someone's using your tool set effective.
So the question is an interesting one. 30 minutes is fast and slow. It's actually a heck of a lot faster than the majority of the people out there because it's automated. Usually 30 minutes is for getting people in the room to figure out what's going on. So you can still have all of this saying, and it doesn't, that's a very good point. We don't need to automate the response. We have the ability to automate the response. There are customers that want to have this and have all the information they want to make a decision. So that's what I tried to mention during the presentation to say, hey, if you have the business context to say, you are losing, let's say, $100,000 every 5 minutes that you don't take an action. And the right sizing costs like $5 a month on an AWS bill. This is kind of a no-brainer. However, that no-brainer will have you hold by a day and a half or two on ServiceNow workflow the approval of change for costs. You know that. So we are going on some of those customers to say, if that equation actually goes over like 50 times the threshold, you don't need to approve. You overrule the approvals and you spend automatically. And that saves a lot of time because the time that is people-related, usually people don't account on those situations. Yeah, there is a lot of point fingers, you're right. So any additional questions? Yes, sir.
So the examples that you used were basically hybrid, but it was on-prem and AWS. What happens when you have other SaaS services that are AWS-based but are running on different accounts? Say you have the Teradata Vantages or Snowflakes or SnapLogic. How do you get those?
So the question is, my example was hybrid and running on premises on AWS. What happens if you have other environments? We are able to tackle to other environments as well, other cloud providers, eventually other systems, like you said, if the customer is running OpenShift, if the customer is running another environment, let's say on top of Snowflake, that runs on AWS and other providers, yes, we can do that as well. I believe there was another question here, but the gentleman actually gave up on me for good reason. So anybody here on this side? No? Yes? No? If not, yes. Do we work on GovCloud and Air Gap? Yes, depends on the GovCloud and the customer that you're talking about. There is a difference between GovCloud, FedRAMP, and all of that. We have part of the solution that's FedRAMP. So I would love to follow up with you to see what agency you're talking about and the specific. If it's United States, Europe, and others. Anybody else? If not, we have 1 minute to go. I'm going to be more than helpful and happy to give you 1 minute back. How kind of me, isn't it?